Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're going to dive deep into one of the most fundamental rules of life on Earth, and that is, how does energy actually move through an ecosystem? It's a story that starts with a single ray of sunlight and literally ends with the mightiest predator. So let's follow that trail of energy, from the sun all the way to the top of the food chain. I mean, just think about it for a second. The last thing you ate, where did that energy come from? And where is it going now? It seems like a simple question, but the answer connects you to this huge, invisible network that powers our entire planet. And this rule applies everywhere. It's pretty simple. Energy flows in a one-way stream, from the eaten to the eater. It's never created or destroyed, right? It's just transferred. And where it goes from there? Well, that completely depends on who eats whom. Okay, so to get started, we're going to look at the simplest model for this energy flow, the food chain. Just think of it as a single straight path that energy can take. So here's the textbook definition for yay. A food chain is just a series of steps where energy gets handed off. It's this linear sequence, showing one organism eating another. It is the absolute most basic blueprint for who eats what. Let's actually trace a path of energy, say in the Florida Everglades. It all kicks off with what we call primary producers, things like algae that capture sunlight. They're the foundation. Then a small flagfish comes along, eats the algae, and bam! It takes in that stored energy. But it doesn't stop there. Next, a bigger fish, like this largemouth bass, comes and eats the flagfish. The transfer just keeps going up the chain. An anhinga, which is a big wading bird, then preys on the bass. And finally, at the very top of this particular chain, an alligator might eat the anhinga. So in this one path, that top carnivore, the gator, is 4 whole steps removed from the original energy source. But here's the thing. That nice, neat straight line, it's a little too simple for the real world. I mean, look at the contrast here. On the left, you've got our simple chain. But on the right, that's a much more accurate picture of the Everglades. Life isn't a neat line. It's a messy, tangled web. Which, of course, brings us to our second section, the food web. This is where things get way more complex and, honestly, a lot more interesting. See, a food web is what you get when you link all the food chains in an ecosystem together. Because let's be real, that largemouth bass doesn't only eat flagfish, and the anhinga eats a bunch of other things besides bass. This huge network of who eats who, that's what ecologists actually study. But this raises a really good question. What about all the plants and animals that just die? Does all that energy just vanish? No way. There's a whole other pathway we need to talk about. Meet the unsung heroes of the ecosystem, decomposers. These guys are basically the recycling center. They break down all the dead organic material and return those essential nutrients back to the soil so the producers can use them all over again. I mean, without them, those nutrients would just be locked up forever. So we've got these super complex webs. But are there any rules that govern them? Oh yeah, and they can be visualized using something we call ecological pyramids. Now to get the pyramids, you first have to understand trophic levels. It's actually pretty simple. Each step in a food chain or web is a trophic level. So producers, like plants, they're on the first level. Herbivores are on the second, carnivores on the third, and so on up the ladder. So when that flagfish eats the algae, does it get 100% of the algae's energy? And when the bass eats the flagfish, does it get all of that fish's energy? The answer to this question basically shapes every single ecosystem on the planet. Ready for it? It's 10%. That's it, just 10%. And that number, it's one of the most important rules in all of ecology. So where in the world does the other 90% go? Well, organisms use most of that energy just to live. Moving, breathing, reproducing. A lot of it is also just lost to the environment as heat. This massive energy drop-off at each step is exactly why we get that classic pyramid shape. There's just less and less energy available the higher up you go. Now, ecologists use 3 main types of pyramids to model this. We've just talked about the pyramid of energy, but you could also measure the total amount of living tissue, what we call biomass, at each level. Or you could simply count the number of individual organisms. A pyramid of numbers usually looks exactly how you'd picture it. It takes a ton of individual producers, like blades of grass, to support a smaller number of herbivores, which in turn support even fewer predators at the top. Makes sense, right? But, and this is a really cool twist, sometimes that pyramid can be flipped completely upside down. Imagine a single huge tree. It has a ton of mass, but it's only one organism. Yet it can support thousands and thousands of insects feeding on it. In that case, your pyramid of numbers would be inverted. So why does any of this matter? Because understanding these webs and pyramids shows us just how fragile an ecosystem can be. What happens when you pull on one of these threads? Let's head down to the Antarctic food web for a second. It's this massive, complex system, but almost every animal in it depends, one way or another, on one tiny creature, krill. They eat the producers, the algae, and then pretty much everything else eats them. So what do you think happens if the krill population suddenly plummets? The results are, well, they're catastrophic. It creates this massive domino effect, hitting populations of penguins, seals, fish, and even the gigantic blue whale. It is a powerful reminder of how messing with just one critical link can threaten to unravel an entire ecosystem. And that brings us right back home. From the Everglades to the Antarctic, every single ecosystem has its critical links, its key players. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? As we look at the complex web that supports our own lives, which links are more fragile than we realize? And what happens if one of them breaks?